She had been walking for 6 days, and she was falling behind. 300 meters behind her, 6 shadows moved through the white. 20,000 years ago, this was the most dangerous place on Earth. The Mammoth Steppe, a frozen sea of grass stretching from Spain to Alaska. It was home to creatures so large, the ground shook when they walked. 300 of them moved together, a living wall of ivory and fur. But at the edge of the herd, one was struggling. She was 55 years old, ancient by mammoth standards. Her tusks had grown for 5 decades, curved, ivory and battle-scarred. She had survived 40 winters. She had raised 7 calves. Her granddaughter had stayed by her side when all others moved ahead. The herd had slowed once, then twice the matriarch kept moving. Somewhere in the white, something had been watching for 3 days. 6 of them patient as the cold itself, and the gap between the elder and her herd kept growing. This is the Pleistocene, the age that made our world. For 2 million years, ice has advanced and retreated across the planet. Right now, 20,000 years ago, it is at its most extreme. Temperatures here dropped to -42 degrees Celsius in winter. Ice locked up so much water that sea levels dropped by 100 meters. Asia and North America were connected, one enormous continent. The Mammoth Steppe, the largest ecosystem Earth has ever known. In this frozen world, grass was the most powerful force on the planet, and the mammoth was the architect of this world. Without mammoths digging through snow, grass would freeze and die. They were not just surviving this world, they were maintaining it. A single mammoth needed 250 kilograms of food each day. That meant 16 hours of eating every single day. But today, a blizzard was coming, and there was no time to eat. The herd's matriarch had seen storms like this before. She began to move faster. The elder had been the first in her family to smell the storm. She had survived the blizzard of 3 years ago. She knew what was coming. At 55, her molars had been replaced 4 times. There were no more left. Without teeth, she could not eat enough. Without food, she grew weaker. The calf stayed close, not because she was told, because she chose to. Mammoth families are matriarchal, led by the oldest female. The matriarch carried 60 years of migration routes in her memory. She knew where the sheltered valleys were. She had been there before. But the elder's pace was half of what it needed to be. 55 years of memory held in this single animal. She remembered the last great blizzard. She had lost 2 calves that day. She touched her granddaughter with her trunk. A language older than words. Keep moving, that was the only rule of the Ice Age. The gap to the herd was now 500 meters, and growing. She had given this herd 50 years, they had not waited. 3 days earlier, they had picked up her scent. Cave lions, Panthera leospelea, the apex predator of the Ice Age. 25% larger than a modern African lion, and built for cold. They had been following this herd for 72 hours without a kill. Cave lions hunted like wolves, with patience, coordination, and memory. Mammoths were too large to kill directly. They needed to separate one first. They had been watching for weakness, and they had found it. The old female at the back, moving too slowly, falling behind. The pack leader, a 9-year-old female, gave a signal no human could hear. At that signal, the pack split into 2 flanking groups. They would circle wide. The storm would cover their approach. The blizzard arrived in 20 minutes. Visibility dropped to 10 meters. In these conditions, sound traveled differently. Smell became everything. She smelled them now, not from the direction she expected. They were already behind her, between her and the herd. The herd was 1 kilometer ahead, and the lions were already between them. She had one advantage over her hunters. She knew this step. 55 years of memory could still save her life. 300 meters to the southeast. She remembered a ridge the lions would not be able to smell around. Wind direction changed there. The calf pressed closer. She was frightened, but she trusted her grandmother. Elder began to move, slowly, deliberately, into the white. Behind her, the pale shapes shifted. They began to follow. She was moving faster than they expected. The old mammoth still had power, but the ridge was 300 meters away. The lions were 70. The lead lion accelerated. She was done waiting. 180 meters. She could see the ridge. The wind had already changed there. She was right. 90 meters. The lead lion's paws left the ground for the first time. She reached the ridge and everything changed. But not in the way you think. She had reached the ridge, but what waited on the other side had not been part of the plan. 6 of them, 3 on each side, a strategy refined over tens of thousands of years of evolution. Cave lions were not solitary hunters. Modern research has confirmed what ancient fossils already suggested. They were strategic, coordinated, and extraordinarily patient. Fossilized trackways discovered across Ice Age Europe show cave lions hunting in packs of up to 8 individuals, surrounding prey in formations that modern lions rarely attempt. The elder understood none of this in scientific terms, but 55 years of survival had written the same lesson directly into her instincts. In that moment, she did not retreat. She did not charge. She did something that neither group of lions had anticipated. She turned east. 150 meters to the east, the ridge dropped gradually into a frozen river valley, a path that ran south. She had used it once, 30 years before. Mammoths possessed spatial memory comparable to that of modern elephants, capable of recalling landscape features across decades and distances of hundreds of kilometers. Studies of modern elephant matriarchs show that the oldest females remember the locations of water sources used only during times of severe drought, information gathered across an entire lifetime. For the elder, the memory of that valley was not a conscious plan. It was something older than thought, a pull toward a place where survival had been possible before. The lions on the southern side of the ridge began to move as well. They had lost direct visual contact, but they had not lost her scent. It was a pursuit measured in meters and minutes. Every step the elder took brought her closer to the valley. Every step the lions took closed the gap. 70 meters. The valley entrance was now visible, a dark depression in the white, where the terrain dropped away and the wind carried a different sound. 50 meters. The lead lion accelerated for the second time. She had made this calculation before. At this distance, against a healthy mammoth, she would fail. But this mammoth was 55 years old. The elder reached the valley entrance. And as she stepped down from the ridge, the wind that had been her enemy became her weapon. The entire scent trail vanished in an instant. Below the ridge, in the shelter of the frozen valley, the wind dropped from 80 kilometers per hour to almost nothing. The elder had known this would happen. The valley floor was frozen solid, a river locked beneath meters of ice. But even here, the cold was absolute. Temperatures in the Mammoth steppe could fall to -42 degrees Celsius during the peak of winter. At those temperatures, an unprotected human being would lose consciousness within minutes. Yet mammoths thrived in this environment, not by chance, but through millions of years of precision engineering. Genetic studies published in the last decade have revealed extraordinary adaptations in the woolly mammoth genome. Specific variants in genes associated with temperature sensation, fat metabolism, and circadian rhythms were all precisely tuned for life in the frozen north. Beneath that fur lay a layer of subcutaneous fat, in some individuals reaching 10 centimeters in thickness. This fat served not merely as insulation, but as an energy reserve that could sustain the animal through weeks of reduced food availability. An adult woolly mammoth in peak condition carried enough stored energy to survive for several weeks without adequate food. But the elder had not been in peak condition for several years. Woolly mammoths cycled through 6 sets of teeth during their lifetime, a biological clock that determined the outer limit of how long any individual could survive. When the final set wore down, the animal could no longer feed adequately. For most of mammoth evolutionary history, this was simply how life ended. Not through predation, not through cold, but through the quiet exhaustion of a biological system that had given everything it had. But the elder had not survived 55 winters by surrendering to exhaustion. She had survived by knowing, with the precision of an animal that had memorized 10,000 square kilometers of terrain, exactly where to go next. The valley ran south. Through it, frozen, silent, and dangerous, lay the river, and along the river, 3 kilometers away, was the sheltered escarpment where the herd had spent previous winters. She had learned the route from her own mother 40 years before, and her mother had learned it from hers. This was how mammoth knowledge survived across generations. Not through language, not through tools, but through the simple act of walking the same paths. Above them, on the ridge they had just left, the cave lion pack reconvened. They had lost the scent. The strategy that had worked for 72 hours had failed at the last moment. For the lions, losing a hunt after 3 days was not unusual. They were built to fail many times for each success, patient enough to wait, experienced enough to begin again. Below, in the valley, the elder moved with the controlled economy of motion that only decades of experience could produce, every step placed precisely, every pause calculated. She was not fleeing, she was navigating. Behind her, the calf struggled to match her grandmother's stride on the slippery ice. 4 years old, she had never walked a frozen river before. But she followed, because that's what calves have always done. They follow, and in following, they learn. Outside the valley, the blizzard had intensified. Wind speeds had climbed past 100 kilometers per hour. In these conditions, even the cave lions had sought temporary shelter. Down in the valley, the sound was different. The walls of terrain absorbed the worst of the wind. What reached the river was still brutally cold, but survivable. The Mammoth steppe, for all its brutality, had created animals of extraordinary tolerance. Woolly mammoths could maintain a core body temperature within a narrow range, even as the environment around them dropped to temperatures that would kill most modern mammals within hours. For the calf, the situation was more precarious. Younger animals had smaller body mass and proportionally greater surface area, losing heat faster in the cold. She pressed against the elder's flank not out of fear alone, but out of physical necessity. This behavior, calves sheltering within the physical warmth of adults, has been documented in every living elephant species. It is one of the oldest survival behaviors in the proboscidean lineage, unchanged across millions of years of evolution. 1 kilometer south, the valley was narrowing. The frozen river here was perhaps 3 meters wide, deep enough in summer to carry a powerful current, now locked solid under 50 centimeters of ice. Above the valley, the cave lion pack had split again. 3 had followed the valley rim eastward, tracking the sound of the mammoth's footsteps, resonating through the frozen ground. They had found her trail again. Sound travels differently through frozen ground than through soil or stone. At temperatures below zero, the permafrost becomes a conductor, transmitting vibrations across hundreds of meters with remarkable clarity. The elder could not see them, but she could feel the vibrations of their paws through the same frozen ground. A subtle tremor that her feet had been reading since the first hour of the pursuit. She was being tracked from above. 3 lions on the valley rim, matching her pace, and some share ahead. She could not yet be certain. The valley opened into the broad plain where the herd's winter shelter lay. 2 kilometers. The valley widened slightly, the river turned northeast. Here, the ice was older and deeper, built up over multiple winters of accumulated freeze. But it was also more fractured. A mammoth weighing nearly 6 tons creates enormous pressure on any surface it crosses. On solid ground, this presents no challenge. On ice, every step is a calculation that even modern engineers would struggle to replicate. She tested 3 different sections of ice before finding a path where the surface held firm. Every delay narrowed the distance between her and the lions on the rim above. The third path held. She moved across it quickly. For a mammoth her age, the pace was remarkable. The calf, lighter by a factor of 10, crossed without hesitation, her small feet finding solid ice that elders' testing had already confirmed. Above the valley, the blizzard had begun to weaken. The first sign, a slight lifting of the cloud base. A thin line of pale light appeared along the western horizon. The storm was passing, and what it revealed would change everything that followed. When the blizzard cleared, the valley was visible from above. All 6 cave lions could now see the 2 mammoths moving south along the frozen river, and the distance between them was less than 60 meters. What happened next represents one of the most sophisticated hunting behaviors ever documented in any large predator. The pack split into 3 roles: drivers, cutters, and the strike pair. Each role required a different position, a different approach, and a different moment of action. The drivers would move parallel to the mammoths, maintaining pressure from both sides, keeping them moving forward and preventing them from turning back toward the valley entrance. The cutters would descend into the valley ahead, positioning themselves at the point where the valley opened into the plain. If the mammoth reached that point, her escape route would be blocked. The strike pair, the two largest and most experienced females, moved to the narrowest point in the valley behind the mammoths. If the elder turned back, they would be waiting. There was no longer any direction that was safe. The elder felt the change before she could explain it. Something in the vibrations from the ground, something in the altered quality of the silence. She had been hunted before, but never by a pack this organized. She stopped. In 55 years of life, stopping was rarely the right choice. Movement was survival. Movement was warmth. Movement was the herd. But in this moment, stopped. Her mind was doing something that movement would have prevented. It was reading the landscape. To the south, two cutters at the valley exit. To the north, the strike pair behind her. To both sides, the drivers on the valley walls. She had seen this geometry before. Elephants call it a death arrangement. In modern elephant behavioral research, scientists have documented cases where matriarchs led their herds in coordinated defensive formations against lion packs, using the collective mass of the group as both shield and weapon. But the elder did not have a herd. She had one 4-year-old calf. What she did next cannot be explained by instinct alone. It required something that science is only beginning to understand in large-brained mammals: the ability to generate novel solutions to unprecedented problems. Along the eastern wall of the valley, there was a ledge, barely wide enough for a mammoth, covered in compacted snow. She had never used it, but she had seen it 30 years ago in passing, and she remembered. The ledge bypassed the valley exit entirely, running along the valley wall and emerging half a kilometer to the east of where the cutters were waiting. If she could traverse it, she would bypass the trap completely. The two cutters realized what was happening. They began to move, abandoning their position at the valley exit to intercept the new route. For the first time in the hunt, the lions were reacting to the mammoth, rather than directing her. On the ledge, the elder moved with a concentration she had not shown since the hunt began. Each foot placed with surgical precision, the calf, pressed against the valley wall, followed step for step. 55 years of experience against 6 lions who had never encountered this exact situation before. She was halfway across the ledge when the lead lion reached the top of the valley wall directly above her. The lion looked down. The mammoth looked up. 12 meters separated them, and for a long moment, neither moved. Cave lions and woolly mammoths had coexisted across the mammoth steppe for hundreds of thousands of years. In that time, an unwritten agreement had emerged, not through communication, but through consequence. A healthy adult mammoth could not be brought down by a cave lion pack, not without cost too great to accept. The mathematics of predation are brutal and clear. A hunter that risks fatal injury in every hunt does not survive long enough to pass on its genes. The lead lion on the valley wall knew this. She had hunted for 9 years. She had watched older females attempt the same calculation and seen what happened when the calculation was wrong. Below her, on the ledge, the elder did something that no researcher alive today has ever witnessed in a living elephant. She held her ground completely, lowering her head so that her tusks pointed directly upward toward the lion. A warning that required no translation. The lion held the ledge position for 4 seconds. In predator decision time, 4 seconds is a long deliberation. Then she stepped back, 1 pace, then another. It was not defeat. It was arithmetic. The elder was old and her teeth were worn. But on that ledge, with her tusks pointing upward, she was still a 5.8-ton animal capable of ending a lion's life with a single strike. The lead lion moved west along the valley rim. The 5 others regrouped behind her. They had not abandoned the hunt. Cave lions do not abandon hunts, but they had recalculated. The elder was still a viable target, but not here and not now. The elder waited 30 seconds after the last lion had gone from sight. Then she moved. Slowly, carefully, she traversed the remaining half of the ledge, the calf stepping in her exact footprints. At the end of the ledge, the tree opened eastward, a broad frozen slope descending toward the main plain. And enough distance, barely visible in the post-storm clarity, were shapes that the elder's eyes had not seen for 8 hours. In that moment, the elder raised her head, and produced a sound that carries across the Mammoth steppe for distances of up to 10 kilometers, a low-frequency contact call that travels not through air, but through the ground itself. Modern researchers have demonstrated that elephants can detect the infrasonic calls of other elephants through their feet, vibrations transmitted through the earth across distances far beyond the range of hearing. The Mammoth steppe was not silent. It was full of messages that most creatures never learn to read. 3 kilometers away, the matriarch stopped walking. She raised her head. She had heard that voice every day for 55 years, and in 30 years of leading this herd, she had never heard it carry quite this particular frequency. The frequency that every matriarch eventually learns to recognize. The sound of an elder who has survived something she was not supposed to survive. The calf heard the answering call before the elder did. The higher frequency harmonics of the response were audible to younger ears. She pushed against the elder's flank. Urgent, insistent. Her grandmother was needed back there. The elder looked east toward the herd. Then she looked north toward the ridge where the lions had disappeared. Then east again. She took a step, and then another. For the first time in 8 hours, she was walking toward something rather than away from it. Behind them, on the ridge to the north, 3 lions watched them go. They had hunted for 4 days. They had failed. But they were alive, and they were patient, and the steppe was long. Somewhere ahead, another herd was moving. Another calculation was already beginning. She had survived the ridge. She had survived the valley. She had survived 6 cave lions across 9 hours and 42 kilometers of frozen terrain. But the 3 kilometers that remained, across open plain, fully exposed, were in some ways the most dangerous of all. Arthritis is not a modern disease. Fossil evidence shows that woolly mammoths suffered from the same degenerative joint conditions that affect elephants and humans today. In the oldest individuals, the deterioration of cartilage in the feet and lower limbs could be severe enough to alter the animal's gait entirely. The elder did not limp in the way that a human might limp. She compensated, redistributing load across her 4 limbs in a pattern that minimized pain at the cost of efficiency. This is what 55 years of survival looks like from the outside. Not strength, but adaptation. To the north, the lion pack had descended from the ridge. They were following at a distance of 400 meters, far enough to remain unseen in the post-storm haze, close enough to close the gap quickly if the elder faltered. This is perhaps the most honest portrait of predator-prey relationships in the ancient world. Not a constant state of terror, but a persistent negotiation. The lions were not trying to exhaust her. They were waiting for the moment when exhaustion came on its own. 2 kilometers to go. The elder called again, the same infrasonic contact call she had sent 40 minutes earlier. This time, the answer came back within seconds. Closer. The herd was moving toward her. What happened next had been documented only once in modern elephant research. A scenario that researchers in Amboseli National Park in Kenya recorded in 1993 and have spent 30 years trying to fully understand. The herd changed direction to intercept a returning matriarch, not waiting. Intercept. Behind the elder, the lead lion stopped walking. She raised her head and read the air. The vibrations through the ground had changed. There were now 14 mammoths moving toward this position. The arithmetic had changed entirely. 6 cave lions against 1 aging mammoth and 1 calf. That was a hunt. 6 cave lions against 14 mammoths moving in formation. That was a different calculation entirely. Evolution had written the answer to that calculation long before any individual lion was born to ask the question. The lead lion turned north. The others followed, one by one, without ceremony and without urgency. They had not failed. They had simply encountered a variable that changed the outcome. They would hunt again tomorrow or the day after. Patient, relentless, already calculating. The elder watched them go. For the first time in 9 hours, nothing was following her. The plain to the north was empty. She stood still for 11 seconds. The length of time that behavioral researchers have identified as the elephant equivalent of a conscious pause between danger and release. Then she turned south, and she walked toward the sound of her herd. 1 kilometer. The first shapes were becoming visible through the residual post-storm haze, dark forms against the pale plain, moving slowly northward. She could smell them now. the specific chemistry of their bodies, individuals she had known for decades. 500 meters. The calf broke away from the elder's flank, running, for the first time in 9 hours, running toward the herd. 4 years old, 43 kilograms, the weight of a decision that needed no thought at all. The elder watched the calf go. Then she followed. Not at a run, her legs would not permit a run, but at the fastest walk that 55 years of survival had left her capable of. It was enough, the herd was close enough now that it did not matter how fast she moved. She was already, in every meaningful sense, home. The matriarch of the herd was 41 years old. She was the elder's daughter, and in the hierarchy of woolly mammoth society, as in modern elephant society, daughters do not simply receive returning mothers. They evaluate them. In the research literature on elephant social dynamics, this moment has a name. Scientists call it the reintegration assessment, the process by which a herd evaluates an individual who has been separated, particularly one who returns showing signs of stress, age, or physical deterioration. The calf stood between them, neither advancing toward the elder nor retreating toward the herd. 4 years old and already performing a social function that required a sophisticated reading of 2 adults who each outweighed her by a factor of 20. The elder stopped at 30 meters. This was the distance that researchers have identified as the social threshold in elephant reunions. Close enough to communicate clearly, far enough to communicate respect. She did not approach further. She waited. What followed lasted 4 minutes and 17 seconds. 4 minutes and 17 seconds in which nothing visibly happened, and in which everything that mattered was being communicated through channels that no human instrument has ever been able to fully measure. Modern infrasonic communication research has revealed that elephants can transmit information about their physical state, their stress levels, and even their recent experiences through the specific frequencies and patterns of their low-frequency calls. The matriarch was not simply waiting. She was reading. What did the elder say in those 4 minutes of infrasonic silence? Science cannot tell us precisely, but behavioral research on modern elephants suggests the content. I am alive. I am exhausted. I am not a threat. I am still myself. The matriarch took 1 step forward, then 2. Then she stopped again, 14 meters now. The herd behind her shifted, a collective movement of 13 animals, reading the same signal and adjusting their formation in response. In modern elephant research, this is called bridging behavior. The deliberate reduction of physical distance by the dominant animal as a signal of acceptance. It is the herd's equivalent of an open door. The elder read the signal. She advanced 2 steps, and then matriarch advanced 2 steps more, 5 meters now. At 5 meters, the trunks could reach each other. And when 2 elephants or 2 mammoths place their trunks against each other's face, science has a word for what that means: recognition. Behind them, the herd moved, all 13 simultaneously. Not in panic, not in excitement, but in the quiet, determined movement of animals who have been separated from something important and are now closing that distance. Within 40 seconds, elder and calf were surrounded. The calf found herself at the center of the herd for the first time since the storm had separated them. Around her on all sides were the massive, warm bodies of animals she had known her entire life. She pressed against the nearest flank and stopped moving entirely. The elder stood at the center of the herd, surrounded by her descendants, her family, the biological chain that she had maintained through 55 winters. At this moment, that chain was unbroken. What the future held for each of them was unknown. But in this moment, the herd existed. For several minutes, nothing happened. The mammoths stood in a loose cluster, touching, rumbling, breathing. Then, slowly, the herd began to move south, toward the escarpment that served as their winter shelter, where food was preserved beneath the snow and the wind was reduced by the terrain. The elder moved with them. It was, by the measure of science, a successful survival event. 1 adult female and 1 juvenile, separated during a storm, pursued by apex predators, had navigated 42 kilometers and rejoined the group. But the elder was not thinking in terms of success. She was doing what mammoths had always done. She was walking. What the elder could not know, what no mammoth alive at this time could have known, was that the world they moved through was already changing. not in ways visible to any individual animal living a single lifetime, but in ways that the geology of the land, the chemistry of the atmosphere, and the biology of their own bodies were already beginning to record. The woolly mammoth story did not end on any single day. It ended across thousands of years, a slow process that left traces not just in the fossil record and the climate data, but in the very genetic code of the last surviving individuals. At the beginning of the 21st century, advances in ancient DNA sequencing technology allowed researchers to read the genome of mammoths that had lived thousands of years after this moment, the last survivors on Wrangel Island in the Arctic Ocean. What they found was both remarkable and sobering. The last mammoths on Wrangel Island, surviving nearly 6,000 years after most continental populations had disappeared, showed clear signs of genomic erosion. Their genomes contained an elevated number of potentially harmful mutations compared to their mainland ancestors. Their genetic diversity had been significantly reduced. Among the most striking findings, genes associated with the sense of smell showed signs of dysfunction in the last Wrangel mammoths. At least one olfactory receptor gene had lost its ability to function normally. For an animal that relied on smell to detect predators, locate water, and identify family members, this was not a minor detail. Mutations also appeared in genes related to immunity, skeletal development, and neurological function. What researchers were reading in the ancient DNA was the record of a population that had become too small, too isolated, to maintain the genetic diversity that resilience requires. Scientists call this process inbreeding depression, but the name does not fully capture what it means in practice. It means that the capacity to adapt, to respond, to survive the unexpected narrows with each generation, until one day the unexpected arrives, and the capacity is no longer there to meet it. But that day was not today. Today the herd was intact. Today, the elders had survived. Today, the calf was warm and moving and alive. And in the world of the Mammoth Steppe, today was all that was ever promised. The Mammoth Steppe at its peak supported populations numbering in the millions. Across the Northern Hemisphere, from Western Europe to Alaska and deep into North America, generation after generation of these animals was born, lived, and died in a world that seemed unchanging. Then the world changed. Not overnight, not in any way that any individual animal could have detected in a single lifetime, but across generations, in the shift of grasslands to shrubs, in the advance of forests northward, in the rising sea levels that turned migration corridors into open ocean. For the mammoths, a greener planet was not a sign of prosperity, it was a sign of crisis. They were not generalists who could adapt to any food source. They were specialists, massive, magnificent specialists who required the specific productivity of the cold, dry grasslands to sustain bodies that weighed 6 to 8 tons. And then there was the other pressure, the one that arrived on 2 legs, carried fire, and had crossed every geographic barrier that the Ice Age had erected. By the time Homo sapiens reached the Mammoth Steppe in significant numbers, the mammoths had already been weakened by generations of habitat loss. Hunting was not the single cause. It was the final weight on a scale already tipping. The continental mammoth populations collapsed at different times, in different places, for overlapping combinations of reasons. By 10,000 years ago, most were gone. By 4,000 years ago, the only survivors were a few hundred animals on a small island in the Arctic Ocean, the last fragment of a world that had once covered half the planet. But that is the end of a story we have not yet reached. Tonight, 20,000 years before Wrangel Island, the elder is still here, the herd is still here, the steppe is still here. The world that built them is still capable of sustaining them. And they are walking south, together, as they have always walked, toward shelter, toward food, toward the next morning. And yet, the elder's teeth are wearing down, and yet, the herd numbers 15, where it once numbered 40 yet. The cold is changing. All of this is true at the same time. Every step forward is also, in ways invisible to the animals taking it, a step in the only direction left. 20,000 years later, in a world that no mammoth ever lived to see, scientists studying the genetic record of the last Wrangel Island survivors began to recognize something disturbing. The patterns they were reading in ancient mammoth DNA looked familiar. The Sumatran rhinoceros, once distributed across Southeast Asia, now survives as fewer than 80 individuals, fragmented among isolated forest patches in Indonesia. Small populations separated by roads, plantations, and human settlements. On a modern map, these appear to be different forests. From an evolutionary perspective, they are Wrangel Islands forming on land. The Asian elephant, the closest living relative of the woolly mammoth, faces pressure that mirrors, with remarkable precision, the early stages of what the mammoth data suggests happened 20,000 years ago. Herds that once ranged freely across connected landscapes now find themselves confined to increasingly restricted fragments. What makes this especially alarming is the timeline. The genetic erosion documented in the last Wrangel mammoths did not happen in a generation. It accumulated over thousands of years of isolation, silently, invisibly, until the population no longer had the resilience to survive what came next. But there is a crucial difference between the mammoths and the species facing these pressures today. The mammoth did not know what was happening. The species going through this process now. We can see them. We can read the signals. We have the science. Today, population geneticists can detect the warning signs of genomic erosion in living populations before those signs become irreversible. DNA sequencing programs are already being used to monitor the genetic health of endangered megafauna, including the African forest elephant, the mountain gorilla, and the black rhinoceros. Population exchange programs, moving individual animals between isolated groups to restore gene flow, are now being implemented for species that show early signs of the same genetic narrowing documented in the Wrangel mammoths. The skeletons of the last mammoths are directly informing how we try to save what remains of the great megafauna today. The most remarkable legacy of the woolly mammoth is not the tusk. It is not the size. It is not the fur or the cold adaptation or the extraordinary memory that allowed matriarchs like the elder to navigate landscapes that no living human has ever seen. The most remarkable legacy of the woolly mammoth is what its extinction is teaching us about how to prevent the next one. Back on the frozen plain, 20,000 years before any of this knowledge existed, the herd was approaching the escarpment. The wind had dropped completely. Across the tundra, in the distance, other herds were moving. The mammoth steppe, for this night at least, was still intact. The elder walked toward the shelter. Around her, her descendants, her family, the biological chain that she had maintained through 55 winters. For this moment, that chain was unbroken. The escarpment was closer now. The south-facing rock wall had trapped several degrees of warmth from the day's thin sunlight. Below it, where the wind never reached, the snow was shallower, and beneath the snow, the preserved grasses of the previous autumn waited. The matriarch led the herd to the base of the escarpment and stopped. This was a decision that required no deliberation. It was the same location that her own mother had led her to 20 years before. And her mother before that, and the mother before that. Generation after generation, the knowledge of this shelter had been passed down not through any language, but through the simple act of following. The elder moved to the escarpment wall. She placed her forehead against the rock, a behavior documented in modern elephants at familiar landmarks, described by researchers as greeting behavior toward a known place. She had been here before, many times, and she would be here again. Around her, the herd settled. Some began immediately to sweep snow with their tusks, exposing the preserved autumn grass beneath. Others pressed together in the warmth of the escarpment's shelter. The calf found a position between the elder and the rock wall, the warmest, most protected spot in the entire formation. She had been shown this place today for the first time. She would remember it for the rest of her life. The sun, such as it was in the deep winter of the last glacial maximum, had begun to set. The thin pale gold of a few minutes ago was already fading to the long blue-gray of an ice age evening. The temperature was dropping below -35, and the mammoth steppe was exactly as it had been for hundreds of thousands of years before this day. Immense, cold, beautiful, and alive. Night on the mammoth steppe was different from darkness in any modern landscape. With no artificial light for thousands of kilometers, the sky above the tundra was a ceiling of stars so dense that early researchers who first described it struggled to find words adequate to the experience. Beneath that sky, the herd slept, most of them. In the deep shelter of the escarpment, bodies pressed together for warmth. Their breathing slowed to the long rhythms of rest. The calf, exhausted from the longest day of her 4 years, had fallen asleep standing, as mammoths always slept, pressed against the elder's flank. The elder did not sleep. Among modern elephants, the oldest matriarchs have been observed to sleep significantly less than younger animals, a pattern that researchers interpret as a form of vigilance that intensifies with experience. The more a matriarch has seen, the more she understands there is to watch for. She was listening for 2 things. The first was the sound that the lions make when they are moving at night. A subtle change in the quality of the ground vibration that any mammoth with enough experience could distinguish from the natural settling of frozen soil. She heard it. 3 kilometers, approaching from the northwest, the same pack. They had rested, and now they were moving again. This too was something the elder had learned across 55 years, that lions do not stop being lions at night. They simply become harder to see. She positioned herself at the northern end of the sleeping herd, the direction from which the lions were approaching. Not an aggressive stance, a protective one. The same position that mammoth matriarchs have occupied since the first lions and the first mammoths began their ancient negotiation. The second thing she was listening for was something the science of elephant behavior has only recently begun to document. In the darkest hours of the night, after a period of extreme stress, elephant matriarchs have been observed producing low-frequency vocalizations directed at specific sleeping individuals, calls that behavioral researchers have tentatively described as reassurance calls. The calf's breathing did not change. She did not wake, but her ear, which had been drooping slightly, rose and then settled back, the smallest possible signal that the call had been received. Whatever language this was, science does not yet have a complete vocabulary for it. But it appears to be very old, and it appears to work. To the north, the lions were 2 kilometers away and closing slowly. To the south, behind the elder, 14 mammoths slept. Above all of them, the Ice Age sky unchanged for 20,000 years before this night, and unchanged for 10,000 years after it. A canopy of light over a world that was, for this moment, exactly as it had always been. The elder stood her post. 1 hour. Then 2. Around midnight, the lion pack veered east, finding a different scent, perhaps a different herd, perhaps nothing. Their tracks in the snow the next morning would show a wide arc that had come within 800 meters of the sleeping mammoths before turning away. At 3 in the morning, by a measurement of time that would not be invented for another 20,000 years, the elder allowed herself to rest, not to sleep, to rest. She lowered her head slightly, slowed her breathing, and entered the state that elephant researchers call standing rest, alert enough to respond, still enough to recover. Beneath the stars of the Ice Age, on the edge of a winter that would last for another 6 months, in the shelter of a rock wall that her own mother had shown her decades before, the elder rested. 55 years old, worn and hungry and exhausted in ways that no single day of rest would remedy. And also, still, here. Before dawn, 4 hours away, the herd would wake. They would eat and call to each other and move again. The elder would lead the first sweep of tusks across the snow, exposing the autumn grasses beneath, teaching the calf, without any explicit intention of teaching, by simply doing what needed to be done. And somewhere in the darkness to the north, a new hunt was already being planned. The lions had not stopped. The world had not paused. The next morning would bring new cold, new snow, new decisions that would need to be made. And the weight of all of them would fall, as it always did, on the oldest shoulders in the herd. But that was tomorrow. Tonight, for the length of time that it takes a cloud of ice crystals to drift across the stars and dissolve, the mammoth steppe was at peace. And in the morning, the elder would still be here. The herd would still be here. And the world that built them, for one more day, would still be here too. Dawn on the Mammoth steppe did not arrive the way dawn arrives in more southern latitudes, with warmth and birdsong and the gradual brightening of color. In the deep winter of the last glacial maximum, dawn was a slow, cold affair. A gray line on the eastern horizon that took more than an hour to become what most living things would recognize as light. The elder had been standing for 6 hours. Through the darkest part of the night and into the first gray of this morning, She had held her position at the northern end of the sleeping herd, ears reading the plain, feet reading the ground, nostrils reading the air. Nothing had come. Tonight at least, the mathematics had worked in the herd's favor. The first to wake was the matriarch. This too is consistent with what researchers have documented in modern elephant herds. The dominant female typically wakes before others, and the order in which individuals rouse from rest reflects the social hierarchy of the group with remarkable consistency. The matriarch looked north at the elder. The elder looked south at the matriarch. Between them, the 6 hours of darkness in which neither had been required to make any decision at all. That was over now. The day, such as it was, had begun. And with the day came everything the night had held in suspension. The calf woke next. She had slept for 6 hours without moving, the deepest sleep of her young life, earned by the longest day of her young life. When her eyes opened, the first thing she did was press harder against the elder's flank, where the elder had been all night. Then she realized the elder was not there. She found the elder by sound before she found her by sight. The infrasonic contact call the elder sent, directed specifically at the calf, at a frequency that no other animal in the herd would have registered as addressed to them, reached the calf's feet before it reached her ears. The calf trotted north. She pressed against the elder's right flank, the same position she had maintained through the entire previous day. The elder lowered her head briefly and touched the calf's face with her trunk. 7 seconds. Then she raised her head and looked north again. The night watch was over. The day had begun, and the day would require food. The mammoth steppe in winter presented a feeding problem that no other ecosystem on Earth has produced at quite the same scale. An adult woolly mammoth required between 100 and 180 kilograms of vegetation per day to maintain body weight. In winter, that vegetation existed, but it was buried. Finding it required work. Knowing where to look required memory. The herd had fully woken now, 13 animals stirring, stretching, producing the morning rumbles that researchers describe as dawn chorus, a daily social reaffirmation of group membership that occurs in every elephant population studied. One by one, they oriented toward the matriarch, waiting for the signal to move. But before the matriarch could signal a direction, the elder moved. She walked south, past the sleeping area, past the matriarch, and continued, heading west, across the plain, toward a section of terrain that the matriarch had not led the herd to in more than 4 years. The matriarch stopped. This was not the expected behavior. In mammoth social structure, as in modern elephant social structure, the dominant female sets the direction of movement. An older individual who has rejoined the herd after a period of separation does not, on the morning of her return, simply walk away from the group toward a location of her own choosing. And yet, the elder was 55 years old. In mammoth years, in elephant years, in any measurement of accumulated experience, 55 years is a library. And the section of plain she was walking toward was a section that the matriarch, at 41, had only visited 11 times in her life. The elder had visited it 43 times. The matriarch watched the elder for 40 seconds. Researchers who have observed similar situations in modern elephant herds describe this as leadership arbitration, the point at which a herd must choose between competing sources of guidance. The younger dominant female, or the older returning individual with more experience. Then the matriarch took one step west. The herd moved with her, all 13, simultaneously, as if the decision had been made not by any individual, but by the collective weight of the information available. The elder was ahead of them by 200 meters. She did not look back. She had known they would follow. Ahead of them, the elder walked west. She had not been to this section of plain in 8 years, but 8 years for a mammoth with 55 years of spatial memory was a short absence. She remembered what was beneath the snow here. She remembered because her own mother had shown it to her, and because she had shown it to the matriarch, when the matriarch was still young enough to need showing. 1 kilometer west of the escarpment, the elder stopped. This was the Pleistocene. She knew it by the slight depression in the terrain, a shallow bowl that caught wind-blown sediment in autumn, creating a layer of accumulated organic material just below the surface. Her tusks had swept this ground more than 40 times. She knew what was here. The first sweep moved 40 kilograms of snow. Beneath it, not the autumn grass she had expected, ice. A layer of ice that had formed during a thaw period in early winter, trapping the grasses beneath a barrier that tusks could chip but not easily break. The elder paused. This had not been here the last time she had come. This phenomenon, a rain-on-snow event followed by rapid refreezing, creating an impenetrable ice crust over winter pasture, is known to modern reindeer herders across Siberia and Scandinavia as black ice famine. For reindeer, it can be catastrophic. For mammoths, with their longer and stronger tusks, it was a challenge rather than an impossibility. But it required effort, and effort costs energy. The herd arrived. The matriarch surveyed the situation. 14 mammoths now approached the depression. And 14 mammoths meant 14 animals with tusks capable of working the ice simultaneously. What one mammoth could chip through in an hour, 14 could break open in minutes. The calf watched the older animals work for 30 seconds. Then she tried. Her tusks, the first set of permanent tusks, barely 20 centimeters long, struck the ice and bounced back, producing a sound that was more of a tap than a blow. She tried again. The ice did not yield. The elder, without interrupting her own work, angled her body to create a patch of broken ice beside her. Broken pieces that even a young tusk could move. She did not stop what she was doing. She did not look at the calf directly. But the patch of workables was clearly placed within the calf's reach. The calf moved to the broken fragments. Her short tusks slid under a piece of ice the size of a small table and pushed. It moved. She pushed again. It moved further, exposing a section of compressed autumn grass beneath, brown and flattened and, by any measure of palatability, far from ideal. But it was food. She ate. This is how knowledge moves through time in a mammoth herd. Not through demonstration that is watched and consciously imitated. Through proximity. Through the simple fact of being beside someone who knows. And in being beside them, learning the shape of what knowing looks like. The calf had not been taught to feed under ice. She had been placed in a position where feeding under ice became possible. The rest was instinct and 4 years of accumulated watching. The grass beneath the ice crust was less nutritious than the elder remembered it. 8 years ago, this depression had supported several hours of productive feeding. Today, the layer of preserved grass was thinner, the ice was harder, and the nutritional return per hour of work was lower than the elder's memory had predicted. This was not a crisis. Not yet. But it was information. The kind of information that a mammoth brain, across many seasons and many decades, was capable of accumulating and processing in ways that science is only beginning to appreciate. The world that the elder's memory had preserved was a world from 8 years ago. And 8 years ago, the world had been slightly different. Paleoclimate data recovered from ice cores drilled in Greenland and Antarctica shows that by 20,000 years ago, the first subtle warming signals that would eventually end the last ice age were already detectable in the atmospheric record. Not a dramatic shift, a trend, the kind that no individual animal could live long enough to witness from beginning to end. But the mammoths were already living inside it. The elder did not know about ice cores. She did not know about atmospheric CO2 or orbital mechanics, or the Milankovitch cycles that were, even at this moment, slowly adjusting the relationship between Earth and the Sun. What she knew was that there was less grass here than she remembered. And that piece of information, simple, immediate, physical, was the same information that the ice cores would eventually confirm, just experienced from a different angle. The matriarch moved to a different section of the depression, east of where the elder was working. Here, the ice was thinner, and the grass was slightly more abundant. The elder had not chosen this section. The matriarch found it independently, by a different 40 years of knowledge leading to the same depression by a different path. The elder moved east, not toward the matriarch specifically, but toward the more productive section of the depression that the matriarch had identified. In the economy of survival, being right matters less than getting fed. The elder had been right about where to go. The matriarch had been right about where in it to feed. 2 memories, 1 outcome. For 45 minutes, the herd fed. It was not enough. The nutritional return from the depression was perhaps 60% of what the elder's memory had suggested it should be. But it was something. And in the logic of survival on the Mammoth steppe, something was always better than nothing. Cave lions, unlike modern African lions, did not restrict their hunting to dawn and dusk. Fossil evidence and bite mark analysis on prey bones suggests they were opportunistic across all daylight hours, adjusting their activity to match the availability and vulnerability of prey rather than to any fixed internal schedule. The elder heard it. The same low-frequency growl she had been listening for all night, now arriving not from the darkness but from the morning light. She raised her head. The herd, trained by millennia of evolution to respond to her posture changes, stopped feeding. She counted, 1 shape on the ridgeline, then 2, then 4. By the time she could see 5, she had already begun to move, not away, but into the center of the herd. In the defensive logic of a mammoth family group, the response to approaching predators was not flight. It was consolidation. Modern research on African elephant defensive formations against lions has documented what researchers call the fortress response, a behavior in which the largest adults position themselves on the outer edge of the group while juveniles and calves are moved to the center. The geometry creates a wall of bodies that even large predators rarely attempt to breach directly. The matriarch took the south-facing position, the direction from which the lions had been approaching most frequently. The elder, without discussion, without any visible signal, moved to the north-facing position. Between them, 13 animals, arranged by age and size, the smallest at the center. 6 cave lions descended the northern slope. They spread as they came, the same pincer geometry of the previous night, adapted now for daylight and for a target that was no longer one exhausted animal but 15 consolidated ones. The lead lion stopped 50 meters from the formation and studied it. At 50 meters, the formation was not a collection of individual animals. It was a wall, 6 tons of flesh and bone and ivory on the outside edge, generating a defensive rumble that traveled through the frozen ground for more than a kilometer in every direction. Any predator within that kilometer could feel it. The lead lion took 3 steps forward. The elder, on the northern edge of the formation, lowered her head, tusks forward, ears spread, weight shifted onto her front legs. She was 22 tons less than in her prime. But in this moment, in this formation, she was not fighting as an individual. She was the northern wall of a fortress. The lead lion took 1 more step, then stopped. At 45 meters, she was looking not at the elder, but past her, at the interior of the formation, where, briefly visible through the legs of the outer ring, the calf moved. In the interior of the formation, the calf could smell the lions. She had smelled them before. Yesterday, in the blizzard, they had been within 20 meters. But yesterday she had been behind the elder alone. Today she was surrounded by 14 other bodies, and the smell that had paralyzed her yesterday produced, today, a different response. She pressed harder against the nearest adult. But she did not make a sound. The standoff lasted 11 minutes. 11 minutes in which 6 lions and 15 mammoths held their positions, separated by 45 meters of frozen plain, reading each other through every sense available to them. Then the lead lion sat down. Not retreating, sitting, a signal that required no translation. This hunt today was over. The elder read the signal. She raised her head slightly, the equivalent in elephant behavioral research of a threat assessment downgrade. The defensive rumble from the rest of the herd followed her cue, dropping by perhaps 10 decibels. The formation held, but its urgency changed. This is the reality of life on the Mammoth steppe that no fossil record can fully capture. The sustained coexistence of predator and prey that was not constant terror, but constant negotiation. Both sides alive, both sides watching. The lions calculating when vulnerability would appear, the mammoths calculating how long they could prevent it. After 40 minutes, the lions moved east, not toward any specific target, just east, following the terrain, reading the plain for other possibilities. They would be back. They were always back, but for now the immediate calculation had resolved in the herd's favor. The formation broke. Not immediately, not until the last of the 6 shapes had been gone for 2 full minutes. Then, slowly, the outer adult stepped back. The interior opened. The calf emerged from the center, blinking in the cold morning light, and walked directly to the elder. She pressed against her grandmother's flank and did not leave it for the rest of the morning. With the lions gone, for now, the herd returned to feeding. There was work still to do. The morning had been interrupted, the depression had provided less than expected, and the 14+ hours of cold still ahead would require stored energy that the herd had not yet fully replenished. The calf stayed with the elder, but this time she did not wait for the elder to create broken ice for her. She positioned herself beside the elder's working area and watched 3 complete tusk sweeps before attempting her own. Her tusks struck the ice resisted. She adjusted her angle, the ice shifted slightly. What happened next has no name in mammoth behavioral research, because mammoth behavioral research, by necessity, works entirely from fossils and inference. But in modern elephant research, it has been documented dozens of times. The elder stopped her own feeding and stood aside, leaving a section of unbroken ice in front of the calf. The calf approached the unbroken ice section. She positioned her feet the way she had watched elder position hers, a wider stance than she had used before, distributing weight forward. She lowered her head. Her 20-centimeter tusk struck the ice at an angle she had not tried before. The ice cracked, not all the way through, but it cracked. She struck again at the same angle. The crack extended. A third blow and a section of ice the size of a dinner plate broke free, revealing a small patch of preserved grass beneath. The calf stood over the exposed patch. She had broken ice for the first time in her life. She ate what was beneath it. The elder watched. Then she returned to her own feeding section and continued where she had left off. The lesson, if that is what it was, required no acknowledgement. Knowledge had passed from one generation to the next, through the simplest possible mechanism. One animal did a thing, and another animal watched, and then the watching animal tried, and the thing was learned. This moment, a 4-year-old mammoth breaking ice for the first time, would leave no trace in the fossil record. No bone records it, no tooth marks preserve it, no sediment layer encodes it. And yet it was, in the deepest sense of what survival means, the most important thing that happened that morning. The elder had survived the hunt, but the calf had learned to feed, and feeding is the first requirement of a future. The morning continued. The herd fed. Some moved to a second section of the depression that the matriarch located by working methodically westward, the opposite direction from where the elder had first led them, finding productive grass where the ice crust had not yet formed a solid layer. By mid-morning, the herd had collectively consumed perhaps 70% of the nutrition they needed for the day. It was not enough, but it was closer than it had been 2 hours ago. The elder's joints ached. The cold had stiffened the tissue in her right foreleg in a way that would take several hours of movement to loosen. But she was still moving. For woolly mammoths, winter was not a season of abundance. It was a season of maintenance, of consuming just enough to maintain body function, of conserving movement to reduce caloric expenditure, of surviving each day as a prerequisite for the next. Spring, when the steppe grasses greened and the nutritional value of vegetation exploded, was the reward. But spring was months away. The elder moved away from the depression and began walking south, back toward the escarpment, toward the shelter that would protect the herd through the middle hours of the day when the cold was at its most penetrating. The calf fell into step beside her, tusk to shoulder as she always had. Behind them, the rest of the herd followed. The matriarch last, as dominant females often do, positioning themselves at the rear of the group during movement to monitor for threats from behind. The family was intact, moving together. The most basic definition of what a herd is: animals that move through time and space in the same direction for reasons they share without needing to articulate. In the years that followed this day, the calf would break ice hundreds of times. She would remember, in the way that animals remember, through the body rather than through language. The angle of her tusks on this morning, the feel of the ice giving way for the first time. And when she had calves of her own, she would stand beside them while they worked at the ice, and she would wait, and they would learn. This is how the mammoth steppe endured for hundreds of thousands of years, not through any single act of extraordinary resilience, through the daily, unglamorous, undramatic accumulation of small survivals. Each calf that learned to feed, each mother that survived another winter, each matriarch whose memory preserved the location of one more hidden resource beneath the ice. The elder walked. 55 years old, joints aching, teeth worn, 70% of her morning nutrition still unreplenished. And ahead of her, the escarpment, the shelter, the afternoon, the next morning, one foot after another, the oldest and most reliable navigation system in the world, forward. By midday, the herd was back under the escarpment. They had fed, survived a lion confrontation, and covered nearly 3 kilometers across exposed terrain. The cold was absolute, -37 degrees Celsius, a temperature that the atmosphere around this location would maintain for the next 4 months without significant variation. The elder settled against the rock wall. Around her, the sounds of a herd at rest, the slow, deep breathing of animals conserving energy, the occasional low rumble of social maintenance, the sound of the calf investigating a patch of ice at the base of the escarpment, working at it with her tusks in the angle she had learned that morning. 2 kilometers to the north, the wind had changed direction. The leading edge of a pressure system that had been building over the Arctic Ocean for 6 days was beginning to push south. The first sign was a change in the quality of the cold. From the dry, still cold of the post-storm morning to something with weight to it, something with movement. Paleoclimate records from the Last Glacial Maximum show that severe weather events on the Mammoth steppe were not isolated incidents. They were the baseline. The climate of 20,000 years ago was characterized by rapid, frequent fluctuations between extreme cold and less extreme cold, with occasional intrusions of Arctic systems that modern meteorologists would classify as extraordinarily severe. The elder's trunk moved first. She extended it northward, read the incoming air for 4 seconds, then retracted it. Her ears had been tracking the pressure change since before the clouds were visible. She produced a single low rumble, not directed at any individual, but directed outward, into the herd space as a general communication. The herd heard it. The youngest calves pressed toward their mothers. The older juveniles moved toward the inner edge of the escarpment's shelter. The adult females adjusted their positions, each finding the combination of rock wall and neighboring body that maximized protection from the incoming wind direction. The preparation for a storm did not look like panic. It looked like knowledge. The new storm arrived faster than the previous one. By early afternoon, visibility had dropped to less than 20 meters. The wind came from the northwest this time, a different angle, cutting across the face of the escarpment rather than being deflected by it. The shelter that had worked perfectly the night before was less effective now. The elder felt this. In the wind's new angle, the escarpment's lee zone had shifted. The optimal shelter point was now 50 meters east of where the herd was positioned. She began to move east along the escarpment wall, not urgently but persistently. The calf followed, then 3 others. Then the matriarch watched, and then she followed too. 50 meters east, a slight inward curve in the escarpment face created a natural alcove. Barely large enough for 5 animals, but enough to shield the most vulnerable members of the herd from the worst of the wind. The elder positioned the calf in the deepest part of the alcove and stood at its entrance. The second storm of 2 days was not as severe as the first, but it was enough to hold the herd in place for the rest of the afternoon. No further feeding, no movement. Just the escarpment, the alcove, the elder at the entrance, and the storm doing what storms had always done on the Mammoth steppe, testing everything it encountered to find anything that was no longer strong enough to withstand it. By evening, the storm had weakened to wind alone. Snow no longer driven horizontally, visibility returning to several hundred meters. The herd had survived 2 major storms in 48 hours. They had lost no animals, their nutritional deficit remained, but it had not reached the level of immediate crisis. For now, and by the margin that mattered, they were intact. At dusk, the elder produced the contact call again, the long-range infrasonic signal that the herd used to locate each other across distances. From the south, several kilometers away, an answering call came back. A different herd, not her family, but known to her. Animals she had met at seasonal gathering points across 55 years of migration routes. The Mammoth steppe, at its peak, was not a collection of isolated herds. It was a network, a vast, distributed social system in which herds maintained awareness of each other across distances of many kilometers, through the infrasonic channels that the frozen ground carried with such fidelity. The elder was not simply the matriarch of one herd. She was a node in a communication system that spanned the northern hemisphere. The sun had set. The second night of the story had begun. Above the escarpment, the same Ice Age sky as the night before, the same Milky Way, the same density of stars that no modern human in any illuminated city has ever seen. The world from above looked unchanged. Below that sky, the elder had resumed her position at the northern edge of the sleeping herd. The calf was pressed against her grandmother's right flank, already asleep. The matriarch was at the south. The escarpment was at their backs, and somewhere to the north, 6 sets of eyes reflecting the light of 20,000 years of stars. The herd was still here. The night had just begun, and the story, for the elder and the calf, and the lions and the mammoth steppe that had made all of them, was nowhere near its end. The third morning arrived without ceremony. No warmth, no color, no particular acknowledgement from the sky that something significant was about to happen. Just the grey, slow, indifferent light of another Ice Age dawn pressing down on the escarpment, and beneath it the elder, still in her standing rest position from the night before. The calf woke first, pressed against the elder's right flank in the alcove. She felt the elder's weight shift, not the controlled shift of an animal that was about to move, but a different kind of shift, the kind that speaks of effort, of something that is harder than it should be. The elder attempted to step forward. Her right foreleg, the arthritic one, the one that had been bearing compensated weight for 2 days and standing on frozen ground for 2 nights, did not respond with the force required. She shifted her weight. She tried again. The leg held, barely, but her movement was wrong, too slow, too deliberate. The kind of movement that a predator reads before a prey animal does. The matriarch saw it from 10 meters away. She produced no sound. She simply walked to the elder's left side and pressed against her. Body weight against body weight, the matriarch's flank becoming a brace for the elder's left side, while the right foreleg was relearning how to carry weight in the new cold. This too is documented in modern elephant behavior. It has a name: bracing support. Research on African elephants has documented cases in which injured or ill individuals are supported by other herd members for periods of up to several days. In some cases, younger animals have been observed standing beside older ones for hours, making no attempt to feed, simply maintaining physical contact. Scientists describe this as one of the clearest behavioral indicators of what, in human terms, we would call empathy. 7 minutes. That was how long the elder stood with support before her right foreleg had warmed enough. From the body heat of the 2 animals pressing against her, from the slow return of circulation that the cold had restricted, to bear weight normally again. 7 minutes is a long time when 6 lions know where you are. The elder heard the alarm. She read it correctly. The lions were not yet in motion. They were observing. What they were observing, a herd clustered tightly around one individual who was not moving with normal efficiency, was exactly the kind of information that apex predators use to calculate risk against reward. She took 1 step. The right foreleg held, stiffly, with less range of motion than it would have in warmer conditions, but it held. She took another step. The leg held again. The matriarch moved with her, staying at her left side. The calf moved with her, staying at her right, not blocking her, not guiding her, just there. On the ridgeline, the 2 lions watched. Then a third joined them, then a fourth. The scouting pair had called the others in, which meant they had assessed the situation as promising. 6 lions, a herd with 1 compromised animal, and the entire morning ahead. In the arithmetic of predation, this was a favorable configuration. The rest of the herd formed up. Not the full fortress response. There was not time to position every animal. But the 7 largest adults moved to the elder's left, right, and rear, creating a moving formation that kept the most vulnerable positions covered as the group began to travel south, away from the ridgeline, toward the main winter shelter 2 kilometers distant. The lions descended the ridgeline. They moved at a measured pace, not the explosive acceleration of a closing hunt, but the controlled, efficient pace of animals who have calculated that their target cannot outrun them. They were right about the mathematics. They had not accounted for the formation. At 150 meters, the matriarch, still at elder's left side, produced a vocalization that researcher Joyce Poole, who has spent 40 years studying elephant communication, has described as among the most complex sounds in the non-human acoustic repertoire. A call that communicates direction, urgency, and social cohesion simultaneously, with a precision that no human language has fully mapped. The herd responded in under 2 seconds. The formation accelerated. Elder's right foreleg, warmer now, moving, matched the new pace. She was not at full capacity, she was at 60%. But 60% of a woolly mammoth is still 4 tons of moving bone and muscle and tusks. And when that 4 tons is embedded in a moving formation of 15 animals, it becomes something that even 6 cave lions pause to recalculate. The lead lion sat down, exactly as she had done the day before. Not retreat, assessment. The moving formation of 15 mammoths, even with one compromised individual at its center, had exceeded the threshold at which a direct assault made evolutionary sense. The morning's first calculation had been wrong. The lions revised it. The formation moved south. At the center of it, the elder walked. Stiffly, slowly. Every step a negotiation between a body that had given 60% and a world that required 100. She was not winning that negotiation. But she was not losing it either. And on the Mammuthus step, in the deep winter of 20,000 years ago, not losing was the only victory that mattered. 2 kilometers. In normal conditions, for a healthy mammoth herd, 2 kilometers of flat terrain represented perhaps 20 minutes of travel. For a formation moving at the pace of its most compromised member, across ice-crusted snow, with 6 predators maintaining a surveillance distance of 200 meters to the north, it would take something closer to an hour. The elder focused on the ground immediately in front of her, not the horizon, not the lions, not the destination. Just the next section of ice-crusted snow that required her right foreleg to load and push and lift and advance. One section at a time. This is what 55 years of survival has in common with what most humans call wisdom, the capacity to reduce an overwhelming problem to its immediate component. The calf walked at her right side, not behind her as she had walked for the first 2 days. Beside her, matching her pace, adjusting her stride to the elder's compromised rhythm. She was 4 years old. She had been born knowing almost nothing and had spent 3 days learning almost everything. At the halfway point, the elder stopped, not because she could not continue, but because her right foreleg required a pause to redistribute. She stood for 40 seconds, weight shifted left, the matriarch still pressed against her side. Around her, the formation held. No one moved ahead. No one was left behind. The herd breathed together. Behind them, the 6 lions also stopped, watching the pause, reading it. The lead lion took 2 steps forward, the rear of the formation, 3 large adult females, turned simultaneously to face north. The lead lion stopped. The calculation remained the same. The mathematics of 15 versus 6 had not changed in 40 seconds. The elder, in this moment, was not the defender. She was the defended. 55 years of protection given to others. Now, for 40 seconds on an ice-crusted plain, being returned. There is nothing in the science of mammoth behavior that can tell us whether the elder was aware of this reversal in any meaningful sense. There is also nothing in the science that allows us to say with certainty that she was not. After 40 seconds, the elder moved forward again. The formation moved with her. 1 kilometer still to go. The right foreleg was functioning, not well, not comfortably, but functioning. The shelter was ahead. The food that the winter pasture beside the main escarpment held was ahead, and the day had barely begun. There was still time. Modern elephant research has documented cases in which elderly matriarchs, in the last season of their lives, lead their herds to specific locations that appear to have been chosen well in advance. Locations that older researchers sometimes describe as last journeys, though the term has been disputed as overly anthropomorphic. What is not disputed is the behavior itself. Old matriarchs go somewhere, with purpose. And the herd follows. The elder had been to the main winter shelter more than 50 times. She had first been brought there as a calf, pressed against her own mother's right flank, matching pace for pace, learning the location the same way the calf beside her was learning it now. The method of transmission was unchanged across 20,000 years. What it produced was unchanged across 20,000 years. The only thing that changed was the individuals doing the learning. 500 meters. The main winter escarpment was now clearly visible. Taller than the overnight shelter, its south-south facing wall catching the thin winter sun. Around its base, the snow was shallower, broken in places where other mammoths had been feeding. The scent of them was there in the air. The herd had been here before the storm. They had held this ground. They were still holding it. At 200 meters, the lions stopped. They had been following since the second morning, 2 days of surveillance, 3 attempts, and no successful hunt. In the ledger of predation, this was not failure. It was investment, and the balance had not yet been called. They would leave now. Return when the mathematics changed again, as it always did, eventually, for every aging animal in every aging body that the steppe had ever produced. The formation reached the base of the main escarpment and dissolved, each animal finding its own position along the south-facing wall, in the shallow snow zone where the winter grasses waited. For the first time in 62 hours, the herd was somewhere that it did not need to defend, somewhere that the ground was familiar, the wind was manageable, and the food was accessible. The elder walked to the south-facing wall. She placed her forehead against it, as she had against the smaller escarpment 2 days before. She stood there for 23 seconds. This specific wall, this specific temperature. The shallow snow at its base. The smell of the rock that had been here for longer than any mammoth had been alive. She was home. The journey was over. Beside her, the calf was already feeding. She had found a section of thin ice at the base of the wall, positioned herself with the wider stance she had learned 2 days ago, and was working at it with the angle she had learned that morning. The ice gave way on the third blow. She ate what was beneath it, without looking up, without ceremony, as though she had been doing this her entire life. Because, in every way that mattered, she now had. The elder watched the calf for a moment. Then she lowered her own head and began to feed beside her. Not teaching, not guiding, just feeding. 2 animals beside each other, each doing what needed to be done. This too is what the mammoth steppe produced. For hundreds of thousands of years, in 10,000 generations of individuals who lived and learned and passed what they learned on, before the world that made them changed beyond the capacity of any individual memory to follow. What we have witnessed across these 3 days is the most honest portrait of woolly mammoth survival that science allows us to construct. It is built from the fossil record, from ancient DNA, from the behavioral research on their closest living relatives, and from the accumulated physics and chemistry of the world that made them. But it is, at its core, a story about an individual animal. And that is deliberate. Scientists who study extinction rarely do so through the lens of individuals. They work with populations, with numbers, with rates, with curves that show how many become fewer, become none over the stretch of centuries. This is necessary, and it is also in the way that all statistical abstractions are incomplete, insufficient, because every extinction is ultimately a collection of individual stories, last individuals, last families, last calves who learned something important and then had nowhere to pass it on. The last woolly mammoth died on Wrangel Island approximately 3,900 years ago. We do not know the precise date. We do not know whether it was a storm, a disease, a failed birth, or simply the exhaustion of a population that had been genetically narrowing for too long. We know it happened. We know that after it happened, no more happened. And we know that this, exactly this, is what an extinction looks like from the inside. Not a catastrophe, not a single day. A long, patient, incremental narrowing of possibility until one morning the possibility runs out. But that is not what we see here. What we see here, in this moment, on this morning, 20,000 years before Wrangel Island, is the opposite of that. We see a herd intact. We see an elder who survived 3 days of conditions that should have killed her and did not. We see a calf who has learned, in 72 hours, the first requirements of an independent life. We see the chain unbroken. 3,900 years is not a long time in geological terms. It is not a long time in evolutionary terms. It is not a long time in any frame of reference larger than a single human life, but it is long enough. Long enough for every piece of knowledge the elder carries, every feeding location, every navigation route, every defensive strategy, every infrasonic call and its meaning, to simply cease to exist in any living mind. This is what the fossil record cannot preserve. Not the bones, not the tusks, which are extraordinary and have survived in permafrost for tens of thousands of years. Not even the DNA, which has taught us so much about how these animals lived and why they died. What the fossil record cannot preserve is the knowledge, the accumulated, embodied, living knowledge that a 55-year-old matriarch carries in the only place it has ever existed, her surviving memory. In the 21st century, the scientists who study woolly mammoths have developed a form of reverence for their subject that is difficult to articulate without sounding unscientific. They work with bones and ice and genomes. But the questions that drive them are not technical questions. They are the questions that this 3-day story has been, in its way, attempting to answer. What was it like? What did they know? What did they lose? The answer this story offers is incomplete, as all answers built from inference must be. But here is what we can say with confidence. They knew each other. They knew the land. They knew the danger and the shelter and the direction of the wind. They passed this knowledge through time, one generation at a time, the same way every living thing on Earth passes its most important information. Not through genes, but through proximity and attention, and the daily practice of being alive together. What does the story of the woolly mammoth mean for the world we live in now? Not as an abstraction, not as a paleontological curiosity, but as a practical, immediate, applicable lesson. The answer is this: the Mammoth steppe was the most productive grassland ecosystem the Pleistocene produced. It supported megafauna at a density and diversity that has not existed since. And it is gone, not because nature failed, but because nature was changed faster than it could adapt. Today, in northeastern Siberia, a project called Pleistocene Park has been working since 1996 to rewild sections of the Arctic with large grazing herbivores, horses, bison, musk oxen, to test whether the dynamics of the Mammoth steppe can be restored. Early results suggest they can. The presence of large herbivores increases grass cover, reduces permafrost thaw, and raises the ecosystem's carbon storage capacity. The mammoths are gone, but what they did, what they were, can still serve as a model. The most ambitious version of this restoration involves de-extinction. The effort to use ancient mammoth DNA recovered from permafrost specimens to introduce mammoth traits into Asian elephant genomes. Research programs in the United States and in Russia are actively working toward this goal. Whether it is achievable, whether what is produced would truly be a mammoth or something new, is a question that science has not yet answered. What we can say is this: the woolly mammoth has become, in the 21st century, one of the most studied extinct animals in history. Every year, new specimens emerge from the thawing permafrost. Every year, the genetic record grows more detailed. Every year, the picture of what they were, how they lived, what they knew, what killed them, becomes more precise. The elder is not real, but the knowledge she represents is. And what the knowledge she represents tells us, through the fossils, through the DNA, through the behavioral research on her living relatives, is something that is both ancient and immediately relevant. Large animals with long lives and deep social bonds and accumulated knowledge passed through family lines are extraordinarily difficult to replace once they are gone. Not just ecologically, informationally. The knowledge dies with the last individual who holds it. This is the most urgent conservation insight that the study of woolly mammoth extinction offers the world today. Not the de-extinction programs, not the permafrost carbon science. This, the knowledge held in the oldest living individuals of long-lived social species, is irreplaceable. When an elephant matriarch dies, the herd loses not just an animal, it loses a library. And libraries, once destroyed, cannot be rebuilt from memory. Back on the Mammoth steppe, 20,000 years before any of this knowledge existed, the elder had finished feeding. She moved to the south-facing wall and settled against it. Her right foreleg, warmer now, was functioning better. The calf settled beside her. The herd around them was quiet. The day's first and greatest crisis had passed. In the early afternoon, the calf moved away from the elder for the first time, without being prompted by any signal from the elder. She walked 15 meters east along the escarpment base, found a section of ice she had not worked before, positioned herself correctly, and broke through on the second blow. She did not look back at the elder. The elder watched her go. She did not follow. She did not call her back. She watched for 11 seconds. The same duration, the researchers would note, as the pause she had held at the edge of the ridgeline when the lions had finally left 2 days before. Then she lowered her own head and returned to the grass at her feet. The calf was 15 meters away. It might as well have been 15 kilometers. It was the same distance, in the currency that matters. She was on her own. What the elder had given the calf in 3 days cannot be itemized completely. The location of the feeding depression, the technique of icebreaking, the geometry of the defensive formation, the infrasonic contact call, and what it means when it comes back quickly versus slowly, the safe path through the ridge valley, the specific alcove in the second escarpment where the wind from the northwest is deflected, the name, if mammoths have names, of the matriarch. All of this will live in the calf's body, not as thought, but as muscle memory, spatial orientation, social reflex and olfactory map. She will carry it forward into the decades of her own life. She will use it every winter, in every storm, against every predator that finds the herd worth the investment of 6 lions and 3 days of calculation. And someday, she will pass it on, the same way it was passed to her. Late afternoon, the winter sun, such as it was, had reached its maximum height, which was not very high, and was already beginning its long descent back toward the horizon. By 4 o'clock, it would be gone. By 5, the temperature would begin its nightly drop. The herd needed to settle into the main shelter before then. The matriarch knew this. The matriarch produced the movement call. A deep, rolling signal that traveled through the ground before it traveled through the air, reaching the feet of every herd member before their ears registered it. One by one, then all at once, the herd began to consolidate, moving toward the deepest section of the main escarpment's southern shelter. The calf heard it. She moved without hesitation, walking back toward the herd with the same confidence she had walked away from it. 15 meters from elder, then 10, then 5. She settled beside the elder's right flank, the familiar position, but differently now. Not behind, not needing to be held, beside. The herd moved into the deep shelter. The temperature was dropping. The northern sky, 200 kilometers away, high in the atmosphere, invisible to any animal on the ground, was already building the conditions for what would become the third significant storm system of the week. But that was tomorrow. Tonight, the shelter was deep, the herd was whole, and the elder was alive. 55 years old, arthritic, undernourished, carrying the weight of 2 sleepless nights and 42 kilometers of blizzard terrain. The elder settled against the deepest section of the escarpment wall and allowed herself, for the first time in 3 days, to close both eyes. Not standing rest, real rest. The kind she had not permitted herself while the calf was unsettled and the lions were close. The calf settled beside her and also closed her eyes. The matriarch took the north-facing position, not because Elder had given it to her, but because she had always been there, always watching, learning for 41 years how to be what Elder was now showing her in real time, how to one day not need to be any longer. Outside the shelter, the plain was empty. The lions had gone north hours ago. The other herd, whose contact call had reached the elder at dusk the night before, was 2 kilometers east, in their own shelter. The mammoth steppe for this evening was at rest. Stars emerged, the same stars as the night before. The same stars as 10,000 years before that, and 10,000 years before that, and as far back as any measurement of time extends. Stars do not care about mammoths. Stars do not care about extinction. Stars have been there for the entire story of life on this planet, and will be there for the remainder of it, whatever that looks like. They are the one constant in a story that has had very few. Beneath those stars, the elder slept. For the first time in 3 days, she slept, and in the shelter of the main winter escarpment, the calf slept beside her, and the matriarch kept watch. And the world for this one night was exactly what it needed to be. The matriarch looked north. The plain was empty. She looked south. The shelter was full. She looked at the elder, really sleeping at last, both eyes closed, and she produced a sound so low and so brief that no instrument outside of specialist elephant research equipment would have registered it at all. 4 researchers who have spent their careers studying elephant contact calls have described the equivalent call in their subjects as one for which they have no adequate English translation. The closest they have offered I am here. We are here. Rest. The elder's breathing deepened. She slept. 4,000 years from now, on a small island in the Arctic Ocean, the last woolly mammoth will die. No one will be there to see it. No record will be made. The permafrost will cover what remains, and what remains will wait. Frozen, patient, silent, for another 4,000 years before the first human scientist pulls it from the ground and asks, "What happened?" But that is not this morning. This morning, 20,000 years before that island, before that silence, before that question, the elder woke. Her right foreleg was still. The cold was still absolute. -39 by the physics of the morning that no mammoth had instruments to measure. The herd was still around her. The calf was already awake, already working at a small section of ice at the base of the wall. The third time in 2 days she had done this on her own initiative, and the most efficient time yet. The elder stepped forward. The right foreleg held. Better than yesterday. Not as well as 5 years ago, but enough. She moved to the feeding section and lowered her head. Around her, the matriarch was already directing the herd to the morning's best pasture. The calf was already fed and already watching the matriarch's signals, learning the next layer of what she would need to know. In the next 4 months, the elder would lead the herd through 2 more major storms, 1 river crossing, and a territorial encounter with another mammoth family group. She would lose 1 tooth to the cold and gain, in the spring, the weight she had lost across these 3 days, plus a small margin beyond that. She would survive this winter. In the spring, the calf, who would not have a name in any human language for another 20,000 years, would break ice for the last time that season and discover the new grass growing beneath it. She would eat it and produce a sound that behavioral researchers studying modern elephants have identified as a vocalization associated with novelty and positive stimulation. The closest human translation, surprise and delight, but that is spring. And this is winter, and winter is not over. The elder is still here, the calf is still learning, the lions are still out there, patient and calculating, the steppe is still cold, and everything that needs to happen today still needs to happen. Forward, always forward, 1 foot at a time, 20,000 years from now, in laboratories that do not yet exist, using technologies that have not yet been invented, analyzing specimens that are still frozen beneath a landscape that has not yet thawed. Scientists will work to understand what these animals were. They will read the genome of the last survivors. They will reconstruct, as best they can, what the elder's descendants looked like in their final years. They will find the signs of genetic erosion. They will find the mutations. They will find what remained and what was lost, and try to understand why. And the answer they will find, the most important answer, is not in the genome. It is not in the permafrost chemistry, or the isotopic record, or the population collapse models. The most important answer is the one this story has been offering for the last 50 minutes. It is this: they were real. They were here. They knew things that we no longer know how to know. And they are gone. But not yet. Not today. Not this morning. Not on this plane, in this cold, in this particular winter of 20,000 years ago. Today the elder is still here, and the calf is still here, and the matriarch is still here. And the lions will be back tomorrow, and the storm after that will be harder than the last, and the grass will be a little thinner every year in ways that no individual mammoth will live long enough to fully measure. But all of that is tomorrow. Today the elder is eating. The calf is eating beside her. The herd is intact. The steppe is cold and white, and in all the ways that matter to the 15 animals standing in the shelter of the main winter escarpment, exactly as it should be. In 4,000 years, the last mammoth will die on Wrangel Island, and the steppe will go silent. In 1,000 years from that, the first human civilization will begin writing things down. And for the first time in the history of life on this planet, something other than DNA will be capable of preserving knowledge across time. The irony is that none of what the elder knew will be among the things written down. It was already gone by the time anyone had a pen. But the bones survived, the DNA survived, the ancient permafrost survived, holding these animals in suspension for tens of thousands of years, waiting. And the closest living relatives of the woolly mammoth, the Asian elephant, the African savanna elephant, the African forest elephant, survived. They are still here, Still matriarch-led, still infrasonic, still moving through landscapes that are shrinking in ways that mirror, with uncomfortable precision, what happened to the mammoth steppe 20,000 years ago. The study of the woolly mammoth is not an exercise in nostalgia for a world we cannot return to. It is a lesson in what we still have, and what we are capable of losing, and what the science of the past can tell us about the choices available in the present. The elder is not real, but what she knew is real, and what happened to what she knew is as real as anything that has ever happened on this planet. The elder raised her head. She looked north, across the plain, past the ridgeline, past the horizon that contained the lions, past the ice sheets that would one day melt, past everything she had ever known and everything she could never know. She looked north for 7 seconds. Then she lowered her head, and she ate.